So, by show of hands, if you were given a time machine, how many of you would like to travel to the future to see what technology would look like, what kind of cars people drive, how people live? Yeah, so by show of hands, yeah, so many people would want to travel to the future to see what the future looks like. But for me, even as a little girl, it has always been to see the past, how people lived. What did they do for fun? What did they eat? What did they drink? Where did they go around? What did they do in general? And as archaeologists, the way that we can have a glimpse into the past is by examining the material culture. Material culture is what is left behind, the things that people made, objects that people made, and tools that people used to make these objects. And in archaeology, part of the material culture that we have is, for example, ceramic assemblages. We have glass objects, coins, of course. We have flint tools, animal bones of different kinds of animals. We have stone objects and many other kinds of finds. And all of this can give us information about how people lived. And what I'm most passionate about is examining the environmental archaeology. So looking at the relationship between people and their environment. How did they use their environment and their surrounding? Did they overuse it? Did they overutilize it? And was the environment, the access to the environment, limited to certain sectors in the society? And the way that I'm going to examine this is by looking at the site of Tel Hazor as a test case. So Tel Hazor is located in the Upper Galilee in Israel, about 15 kilometers north of the Sea of Galilee and on the southwestern shores of the ancient Hula Lake. It was the largest and most important Canaanite center in the 2nd millennium BCE, when it encompassed an area of about 80 hectares, including both an upper city and a lower city, which is this huge field over here. And in the upper city, we had public buildings. And in the lower city, we had both private buildings and public buildings as well. And from this period, the Canaanite period, the 2nd millennium BCE, we have information about general historical processes, political processes. We know these from texts, and we know this from archaeology as well. But we have less information on the daily life of people, and even less so on the way that people use their environment, their relationship with their surrounding and their environment. And this is something that I want to fix. This is something that I want to learn about. And I'm going to show you now 4 different types of material culture that we can use in order to have this information. This summer, I will start a new project in the lower city of Hazor. So this huge field that we have here, I will start a new project in just this one area, where I will focus on both a public structure as well as a private structure, so houses of people. So the first type of material culture is architecture. I'm going to look at the architecture of different buildings, the public buildings and the private buildings. And we're going to try and identify different types of activities that took place in these structures. We're also going to look if there is any kind of limitation of access of people to the different rooms in these buildings, both in the public buildings and in the houses of people. And lastly, we're also going to look at external courtyards. External courtyards are courtyards that are not part of the public building, they're not part of houses, they're a public area where people can come and meet and do different types of activities, and we're going to try to identify the activities that took place there. We're also going to look at pottery. This is part of the bread and butter of archaeological research. And we have ceramic assemblages from both public and private buildings. And what we're going to do is look at these vessels, which are the best indicators for the activities that took places in these buildings. For example, if we have a large amount of bowls, this would mean that there was a consumption of food and drink. But if we have a large amount of cooking pots, it means that cooking activity took place in this area. We're also going to look at storage activities. Did people rely only on their rulers to store their agricultural goods, or did they not rely on their rulers at all and only store their goods in their own houses? We're also going to look at the technology of pottery. By using the naked eye, we can identify if pottery is made locally or if it is imported from places like Greece and Cyprus. We can tell this by the shape of the vessel, the color of the clay, the decorations, the way the shards feel. This is how we can tell if it's imported or locally made. But by using the microscope, we can tell what region the local vessels come from. Do they come from nearby to Hazor? Do they come from regions in different parts of the country? We can tell this by looking in the microscope. And lastly, we can also conduct an organic residue analysis, which can tell us, this is a chemical analysis that can tell us what were the contents of the different vessels. We're also going to look at large mammals. This is both domesticated animals and game animals. And we're going to examine their distribution in a different context, the private and public buildings, and see if we can identify if, for example, the game animals are found only in public buildings, so this is an activity only of the elites, or if they are found also in domestic buildings. And then this would mean that hunting was an activity that everybody took part in, and this would, of course, affect the environment. We're also going to look at the variety. Do we have more goats, more sheep, more cow? Each kind of these animals consumes a different amount of water. So goats consume a relatively much smaller amount of water than sheep. And so if we have a large amount of goats, it would mean that water maybe was not as accessible. We're also going to look at the age and sex of the butchered animals. If animals are butchered at a very young age, it means that they weren't used until the end of their life. They were dispensable, and the herd was large enough. We're also going to look at the sex of the animal. If we have a lot of female animals in the bone assemblage, it means that females were dispensable. In other words, they didn't need so many females to expand the herd. And lastly, we're going to look at the amount of animal bones. If we have a large amount of animal bones, this would mean wealth and abundance of the inhabitants of the city. And lastly, we're going to look at the fish bones. We have, first of all, like with the other animal bones, we're going to look at the context of where the fish were found, in private or public buildings. And within this context, we're going to examine different questions. First of all, we're going to look at the variety. Do we have mainly local fish, fish that come from the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, or the Hula Lake? Or do we have mainly imported fish, fish that come from the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, not from the Dead Sea, or fish that come from the Nile River? These are fish that are imported into the site. In all other sites from this period, we have a large amount of imported fish to different sites, even sites with a similar environment and surrounding to Hazor. Is this also going to be the information that we have once we look at our fish assemblage? Spoiler, the answer is no. And we're also going to look at the amount. Like I said before, this would indicate wealth and abundance of the site. And lastly, we're going to look at the size of the fish. Do we have large fish, which indicate these fish fed a large amount of people? Or do we have, on the other side, many small fish, which means a different way to reflect abundance and wealth? So these are only four types of ways that we're going to examine the material culture in order to see how people used their environment. So thank you very much. And you are all welcome to come visit our excavation this summer.
Questions? Hi, this is Maria from Technion. Wonderful presentation. It is just a curiosity that I have. Why did you choose that area? This is because contain both places that you want to study, or why?
That's a great question. So the reason why I chose Tel Hazor, there are Several reasons why. First of all, I was working at the site for the past 15 years, so it was just natural for me to ask my questions on this site. But the other thing is, you're exactly right. This is maybe one of the only places in the country that we know we have domestic buildings, so people's houses, right next to public buildings. In other sites, we don't really know where the people lived in other sites because we have temples and palaces and gates. And in this site, we also have houses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for a very interesting talk. My name is Ronen Gottesman from the Hebrew University. I have two questions, if you have time. The first one, how do you use a microscope to understand the origin of the pottery? And the second question, back then, how did they import fish?
Okay, great questions. So first of all, about using the microscope. The way we do it is we make a slide out of the pottery section. So we make a thin section, put it on a slide, and look under the microscope and look at geological elements in this thin slide. To make pottery, people need to bring stones to make the clay more elastic. So what we know is that people bring the stones from not very far. So the stones would be part of the geological matrix of the area where the production center is located. And the second question was about how did they import fish. So this is a question that still remains. We don't know 100%. One option is that they smoked the fish. Another option is that they kept it in salt, and this is how they brought it. So we still don't know.
Thank you.
Again?
Nope.
Wait.
Yeah, maybe you will hear me. Yeah. Hi. Oh. Thank you so much. Alla Marchenko, Hebrew University from Jerusalem. I'm just curious. I mean, it's so interesting, so rich, so diverse. I'm very happy also to visit the site one day. I'm curious as a sociologist, you have assumptions, for instance, people did not have as many goats as sheep for some reason, or there were more females than males, it means something. But could it be also different explanations? People could have some, I don't know, tradition, superstition against something that can't be grasped only by this approach. And if so, are there any ways to get this information?
Okay, that's a great question about involving sociology and archaeology together. So, of course, like you said, there can be many different reasons why things are we find them in different ways. As archaeologists, I can tell you now a joke that whenever we find something that we don't understand, we say it's cultic, okay? Because that explains everything. But one of the ways where we're going to explain why we don't have a lot of imported fish bones and only local fish bones is, like you said, maybe there was some kind of a taboo on imported fish. And the way we're going to examine this is by the new excavation. The public building is actually a temple. And if there is a taboo on imported fish, this would be emphasized while excavating the temple. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your talk. I'm Ishbal from Tel Aviv University. I have a weird question, but you said that you examine the sex of the animals, but I assume that about 50% of the born animals are female and 50% are male, and all died eventually. So how come you have a difference in the amount of female or male animals?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question on why we would have more female or more male in the bone assemblage. So the assemblages we find are not of animals that died naturally, but they are they're actually the trash of animals that were butchered. They're the trash of meals and feasts that took place at the site. So they were butchered by choice at a certain age, and certain sects of animals were butchered for the meal. So, for example, if I have a small herd and I want to make it larger, I would butcher only the male animals and keep all the females because I only need one male to make the herd larger. If I need these animals to do a lot of field work, I would butcher them at the end of their life when they cannot do any more work. And then most of my bones would be of older animals. I hope I answered your question.
So eventually they ate all of the animals. It just depends in which age they butchered each sex, right?
I don't know if they ate all the animals, because if they have young, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't really understand in eating meat. But I think that when the animal is younger, the meat is better. So if they can, if their herd is large enough, they're not going to waste their time on eating and butchering old animals when they have young animals that are available to them. Also, there was a trade, and they could trade the animals to other sites. And maybe the other side doesn't have a large herd, and then they would be the ones that would eat this old, not very tasty animal.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah from the Ben-Gurion University in Beersheba. Very interesting talk, and I think that Israel is one of the best places in the world for an archaeologist. And regarding this fact, I'm curious about these sites that you're studying, Tel Hazor, right? How was it connected with the overall country? Which are the other populations that were, I don't know, commerciate with this or fighting with them?
Okay, so thank you, Sarah. That question can be a talk on its own, but I will try to say just a few words. So Hazor, like I said, was the largest and most important Canaanite center in the area of Israel. It had connections with cities all the way in Iraq, all the way in Syria and in Egypt. And we have Egyptian statues, we have mentioning of Hazor in archives in these different cities, and these different cities are also mentioned in archives in texts that were found at Hazor. So we know that there was an international relationship between Hazor and these other cities. Also, in the biblical narrative, Hazor is mentioned as the head of all those kingdoms, all these Canaanite kingdoms. So Hazor was like the ruler of the other cities. It was, in a way, the main city, the capital city of the land of Canaan, even though it was all kingdoms. Independent kingdoms, but Hazor was the strongest and most important one of all these different kingdoms. For example, Megiddo, Shechem, Jerusalem, all of these different cities that existed at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shlomit. Thank you.